Hey there everyone, this is Dan Lan, here with his first analysis video, basically Dan's dissection, on my boy, Oblivion the Opossum. The reason why I personally voted for him was because I thought he was my current main character, like the main of the main, and it's kind of good to give Soleil a break right now, as her dissection video technically was done for voice recordings, but I felt like I didn't give her enough respect, so I'll have to do hers another time, a much more complete version. But for now, we're just gonna focus on Oblivion. So, about this character, there are many things we should know about him. I mean, after all, he is the god of spirits, um, the silent one, the black swordsman, the Yang, all these other nicknames he's been referred to over his time. And, well, let me go to another page right now as I get you his, information. So I have here a bio about this character, a lot of things about him. And this was an old post I did a while back. Obviously, it's outdated now, but it's the most updated bio I ever have of this guy. So, Oblivion is now currently 20. No, he's not 19 anymore. That was back in last year. But he is now currently 20 years old. His race is that he's an opossum. He is a deity. And, like I said before, he has a bunch of alias, or a bunch of nicknames. As in brother, older brother, possum, the assassin, idiot. You know, interesting nicknames here and there. In terms of his occupation, he is a deity, a wanderer, a fighter, hero, part-time skateboard guru, and a newspaper boy. Well, sometimes he works as one. He's a swordsman. He's a master strategic tactician about and of course, many other things. Anyways, before I go more into his bio and more into who he is, let me just touch base upon the main details I will cover for each characters in Dan dissection. And I'm recording all this without any sort of changes in the video development because I'm a person who doesn't have a lot of technical background experience, and I don't have the patience to put up with editing videos, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time into that. So basically, I'm doing this all without any sort of preparation. I'm literally doing this based off in just one go. Anyways, so each character I will focus on their backstory, their abilities, their personality, motives, strengths, weaknesses, hobbies, and their central ideologies. Now, I just described his hobbies, so we cover that. Now I should go to Oblivion's backstory. I will describe his personality later. And, of course, his relationships, all of that fun stuff. In order to understand Oblivion, we have to get into his background. And how it starts off is that Oblivion is the son of a great warrior, Esper, who once lived on a planet known as Magnolia. Magnolia is a planet that happens to be far away from Earth, like very far away. Universes, dimensions away, and this is important to note because a lot of my characters happen to also be from Magnolia. So that is something we need to also keep in mind. Magnolia is a monarchy-run planet where its entire kingdom is made of greenery and the glorious beauty of the flora and fauna. It is basically a very impressive planet because it's not been overtaken by technology, and it's a very beautiful place. It's basically like Mother Nature basically would have chosen this place if you lived there. There's very few technology found, very little pollution. So on the outside, Magnolia is a very beautiful place. Basically, it's headed by the family birds. These birds take control of the kingdom. However, one day, rumors were told that a famous prophecy held from the legends that a possum would one day rebel and overthrow the Magnolia Kingdom. Fearing for this worst, the king himself, who is King Maximilian, the father of Soleil the magpie, Mystique the magpie, hired the opossums as their soldiers to fight and risk and die for their country, or in this case their planet as well, in order to distract them from their true intentions the king greatly feared. The true intentions basically implying they may eventually overthrow the kingdom and, fun stuff. And unfortunately, one such possum was targeted. He was one of the best warriors of his time, and he won so many battles for Magnolia, but was also feared by the kingdom for his great power. His name, Orion the Opossum, who is Oblivion's older brother. After dutifully serving his country, Orion was unfortunately called by the king for evening feast only to be assassinated after being locked in the castle courtyard by soldiers all around the dark. Now you're probably wondering, who was Orion? What's his brother like? Why was he targeted and why was he killed? Well, you see here, when Oblivion was still relatively very young, we're talking about when he was a baby until his early childhood, he did have an older brother named Orion, who basically raised him as his own little brother. At the time, Oblivion did have both of his parents, and his mom and his dad. However, there were some issues. One of the things that you will remember if you ever know the character really well is that Oblivion's family used to be very poor. His mom was just in a terrible state at one point, and she fell ill. I have yet to really go down to why she grew ill and whatever happened to her. That will be found out in Magnolia Tales, which is basically a series that I'm doing, like a kind of like a fan fiction series, like what Netta does with her AU. Basically, that's the Magnolia Tales. Basically, are a series of stories that explain each character and how they came to be the way they are. One of them will detail more about Orion. Anyways, back to the subject at hand. Oblivion's mom dies. And at the time, Oblivion was only 4. Orion was 8, so confirmed Orion is 4 years older than Oblivion. And of course, their dad, fell into a deep, deep state of grief. And why did she die? Well, all we know is that their family was very poor because at the time, the Possum tribe was known to be, again, targeted because of the rumors held by the prophecy, which the prophecy, of course, you now know because the prophecy basically stated that, hey, look, the possums will now overthrow your kingdom. Well, anyways, back to the point, the mom dies, and her name is Emily, and Oblivion's dad, we know, is Owesper, and we know that. Okay, so what happened next is that Orion at one point, and he basically leaves the home after a little while after his mother is passed away, and he serves in the academy, which is basically spoilers, basically a training place for the next group of soldiers in line to defend the kingdom, the main kingdom. There are several kingdoms in the Magnolia. We learned later on that there will be in Magnolia Tales, but the main kingdom is the one run by King Maximilian. Anyways, he goes off, trains, and becomes very powerful. And during this time, Orion himself makes a name for himself. He is basically a prodigy. He has been known to be very powerful in swordsmanship skills, and it's because of Orion that also Oblivion kind of begins to have these great skills in swordsmanship and basically in combat in general. Orion is a very important person in Oblivion's life. Knowing Oblivion, you have to know Orion because the two are very closely connected. And you will find out later on why, of course, Orion's eventual fate becomes very important to Oblivion's life. Anyways, to those people who are in the roleplay chat, you will realize that Orion has a lot of interesting relationships with certain characters. One of which is Soleil, Princess Soleil at the time. And Orion, let's just say he has kind of a crush on her. And he does not, of course, admit this because Orion, of course, is he's low class. He's a possum. He's not among the royal birds, and he happens to be very, humble. And like I said, Orion, a lot of his traits, a lot of the things that he teaches will eventually be passed down to Oblivion, which this is why the two are very similar at times. And this is one of those traits, being humble. Orion, of course, never admits this. Soleil, of course, being Soleil, she knows this pretty easily. And even when she was still young herself, Soleil was known to be very smart when it comes to not just fighting and ruling kingdom, but just in generally with feelings. She's very good when it comes to EQ, or I guess you would call it the emotional quotient. She knows how someone feels, and she knows when someone clearly crushes on someone, and she usually tends to dote on him. Now, what does she think of O'Brien? That's something we have yet to find out. But that's for another story another time. Anyways, back to Orion. He eventually does a lot of great things for the kingdom, but unfortunately one day, the king had enough, and he's thinking, Orion is getting too big, too powerful, too well known, and even my own daughter here clearly has a lot of interesting moments with him, so I'm probably going to assassinate you. And of course, that goes pretty bad. 3 years pass, and after this, well, basically, well, not 3 years past yet. We're not there yet. What happened was Orion gets killed, and this was during when Oblivion was 11. Orion at the time was 15. Yeah, he died when he was 15 years old. Yes, Orion got really powerful in his time. He actually became a commander of Magnolia. So yes, he was really famous for his time, and he did eventually become very important to the kingdom. But because of his sudden increase in popularity, sudden increase in not just popularity, but strength and wisdom, and just basically being the new celebrity here in Magnolia, despite just being a lowly possum, he basically was assassinated. And this was, again, like I said, when Oblivion was 11 and Orion was 15. During this time, there was a very key moment. Oblivion, when he finds out that Orion died, that was bad news. Like, bad news. Like, this was the second person Oblivion had lost in his lifetime. First person was his mother. Second person was Orion. But Orion's death was pretty big because Oblivion was close to Orion. They've been brothers ever since, and to top it all off, you have to keep in mind, not only was he an older brother figure to Oblivion, but Orion was sort of a person who kind of grew distant. After he became part of the army and became the commander, and he led so many victorious battles, Oblivion never got to see his brother as much. And to find out that the very key reason, the very government, the very kingdom that had hired Orion to do all these things, that he had to sacrifice all his time, all his attention, all his spirit, everything, just to defend this kingdom. This very kingdom basically betrayed him and killed him in cold blood. I mean, look, he was killed after being assassinated, you know? And you're probably wondering, how does Oblivion know all that? Well, Oblivion actually sees it. He at one point kind of sneaked in. After, I will say there will be some spoilers on this, but at one point he was invited by the kingdom. By the kingdom. No one's going to tell Oblivion what happened, but some of the people who were hired were supposed to throw Orion's corpse away. They forgot to do that. Orion was laying cold blood. Oblivion saw that, and suddenly something changed. Oblivion basically wanted revenge. But not just revenge. He had another motive too, even bigger. He wanted his kingdom to be overthrown, not just for himself, but for everyone. Everyone in his tribe. Everyone that was poor, low class, everyone who was oppressed by the kingdom, he wanted payback. And like I said before, you're probably wondering, maybe he's going too far, but Orion was a very important person to Oblivion. Very important person. And he had it. I mean, look at him. His mom died because of not proper medicine. There were not enough money. There was not enough resources. His brother died because he was betrayed. It's starting to be enough for him. He's starting to find out. And then, over the course of this time, when he's 11, he begins to train. He begins to start, basically, at the early stage of his at the early stage of his pre-adolescence, when he's still 11, after he finds out that his brother died, he begins to train a lot, and he takes a lot of the practices his brother taught him, his father taught him, because yes, his dad was also a famous swordsman himself. Basically, he begins to master his spiritual energy, and he trains. But of course, he's a novice. He's just his brother never taught him too much, and he didn't have that much experience in fighting. So there are many times where Oblivion himself will get in trouble. However, thanks to a certain raccoon, he was at one point, I will say, he met Ren at one point when he was around 11 to 12, or 11 to 12. I have to decide how old he was, but it was during that time span. And he meets Ren. Ren at one point has to help him in one circumstance. I won't spoil it, but she does help him eventually to get out of a pretty messy situation. And from then on, she begins to take him under her wing, and she trains him even more, teaches him how to survive, not just simply fighting, but how to actually talk to people, how to get food, get money, get water, get clothes. Basic survival tips, basically any person surviving the streets would be taught to. And, yeah. This is what happened. 3 years had passed ever since then, and Oblivion was unstoppable. Because of Ren, he begins to master a lot of things like martial arts, swordsmanship. Oblivion used to be a pranker, so that, of course, got, that helps with his rather unexpected fighting style. And because of this, because he was badly mistreated, and often left alone to fend for himself, with few people to help him, like Ren, he really thought it was the last straw. And so, by the time he was 15, he and Ren team up, and they go to the kingdom, and they stormed in. Now, you're probably also wondering, where does this Desdemona come in? Desdemona showed up at some point during this time. This was probably when Oblivion was still 11-ish, so I guess he was 11 at the time. Ren, of course, is actually, surprisingly, 3 years younger than him. She's like 8 at the time when she saw him. So, yeah, when she was 8, Oblivion was 11, they found Desdemona, who was 1 year old. Yes, Jacob. Ren was 8 years old, and she was already surviving the streets. She was that smart. One of the things you will learn in Magnolia Tales is that Rin was a very important character, and one of the things that people underestimate is her intelligence and her wisdom and her maturity. She is very young, but she is so very mature, because if she wasn't mature, she'd probably be dead by now. Ren's life will be given more intel when we get to the Magnolia Tales. But back to Oblivion. So when he's 15, he goes off to the kingdom, he attacks, and he fights the guards, he goes in, and then one very key moment happened, and this is Ren's death. Ren died when she was 12, Oblivion was only 15, Desdemona was only 5. What happened was that she sacrificed herself. At one point, the guards were chasing them as we're nearing the kingdom, because, of course, once you get closer to the kingdom, there's more guards, so it becomes more and more fortified. The guards were really close, and they were knocking some arrows. Like, they had some arrows pulled, ready to be unleashed. Oblivion was their first target. If he had taken those arrows, he would have died. But Ren pushed him away at the last second, and she got shot on the back. And why did she do it? My friends, this is where Ren is unique. She is someone who protects people. Even if they're not raccoons, even if they're not people she's very close to, she still has a heart, and she does protect people who she cares about. At the time, Oblivion was basically like her apprentice, and she was his mentor. And of course, if your own child or your own student is being about to be attacked, you probably would sacrifice your life sometimes just to, make sure he lives. And of course, at the time, she knew how important this was to him, to revenge, to not just simply his brother, but to overthrow the kingdom, to not only avenge, but to protect the entire Magnolia planet, because the poor people, the children, the babies, the parents, everyone, He had to avenge for those people. He had to do what was right. And of course, what happened was he got in. He finally made it to the kingdom thanks to Ren. He waged 3 years of battles ever since from he was around 11 to 12 to 15. And he basically, once he got into the castle, he was by himself because Ren was dead by then. Pretty much all their allies were either gone, killed, or something happened to them. Basically, he's alone. He goes to the castle grounds, and then he stops and meets King Maximilian. So yes, a battle showed off happened between Soleil's father and Oblivion. He lost because, the king was pretty tough himself. He was defeated, and then he was stopped in the rooms, palace rooms. And then one moment, and this is a key moment, he was freed by Mystique the Magpie, the princess at Magnolia, the daughter of King Maximilian, and the older sister figure to Oblivion. And they were friends. They were friends as they were little. I forgot to mention this, but Mystique actually met Oblivion at one point too. Oblivion met her when he was only 4 years old. So yes, he knew Mystique even before he knew Ren. And the time Mystique was 6 years old. So she's actually 2 years older than him. So by this point, Mystique has 17. And yeah, she freed him into the cells. She from the cells. And they went to one of the castle spaceships and they They went far away. They were going nowhere. They just went to some random place and happened to be Earth. And they got escaped. Why? Because Oblivion was going to get killed. And at the time, she valued Oblivion's life more than, unfortunately, she valued more than her family. You will find out later on why Mystique didn't really care too much about her family, nearly as much as Oblivion. Unfortunately, that is a fact. And we'll get to that later if we ever get to her breakdown. But anyways, many years pass. And once we get to this part of the story, we start to get into the Estes series. And what happens is Oblivion begins to adopt a much more domesticated life. And he becomes not only closer with Mystique, but he makes a lot of other friends. Among them includes Shadow, Maria, and Alpha, and Malice. Yes, Malice. Also, aka Alice. She is a very important character. We will find out later on, too, that during this time, at one point, this is basically after he's 15, so time skip 3 years later, 4 years later, when he's 19, he begins to have a very close relationship with Alice, but something went badly wrong. At one point, Alice and Oblivion were fighting a bunch of bad people. Like, not bad people, bad phantoms in the Phantom Realm, which is one of the realms that Alice goes to. Alice happens to have also her own abilities and magic. And at the time, her goal was to be rid of these monsters-like things. I kind of forgot why exactly, but there was a reason behind it. One of the reasons was probably because she was attempting to find evidence and clues to this other powerful being named Rosa. Which, of course, you probably guys don't even know who Rosa is, but she was one of the characters that Mona used. Mona happens to be a former Estes member, and she used to have characters of her own that were closely tied in with my characters. Anyways, after some personal issues between Oblivion and Alice, Oblivion kind of feels he's useless and he's unable to protect her and to protect the people who he cares about. So he kind of goes into a coma state because he falls ill from emotional breakdown, and also he fell ill because at the time, Alice had actually sapped all his energy away because at one point Oblivion got really, really raged, and he used a lot of dark powers. We will find out more about Oblivion in terms of his techniques and abilities, but because of what happened to Oblivion, he basically had his power sapped away. So yeah, he was basically already dying by that point. This is basically we're getting to the Estes series in the Oblivion saga. And I will say one more thing about the relationship. Oblivion likes Alice because she reminds him of Ren. Fact. That is a fact. And Oblivion just likes Alice because the people who know her, we know her attitude. She's a very tough person. She happens to be that kind of person who doesn't care, believes what she believes. something Oblivion does respect, and that is a reason why Oblivion appreciates her, because she is someone that reminds him of not only Ren, but she is someone who reminds him of his own shortcomings. Oblivion happens to be, in terms of his personality, someone who does need a lot of confidence. But we'll get back to that later a bit. Back to the story. So basically, Oblivion comes back to the kingdom, and at the time, Soleil thought that he kidnapped Mystique because of a bunch of misunderstandings. After Mystique basically saved Oblivion and escaped with him, people did not really realize, especially Soleil, did not realize the real truth behind that. So she basically hates Oblivion. She goes and sends her 2 bodyguards, Cypher and Bronx. They hatch a plan. And in what happened in the Oblivion saga was those 2 bodyguards, they used like some sort of sleeping gas, and they basically had everyone fell asleep. They basically trapped Oblivion in the group, saying, hey, come into this room. And, they fell for it. And then Soleil, we get to see more about Soleil and Mystique, their relationship. Soleil finds out the truth from Mystique shortly after she captures Oblivion and the others. And she frees them, telling them, hey, if you want to apologize and such, you're going to have to fight me in the tournament. And of course, at the time, Oblivion disguised himself as Orion because he had some personal issues at the time. He did not want people to bear the burden. And because at the time, like I said, he had some issues with Alice, like her relationship was pretty bad. That's why he had disguised as Orion, because he had some self-esteem issues. And, it's not really good to let people know, hey, I'm Oblivion. Even though we had a big fight and argument, it's not like it doesn't matter. That's a problem. So, that's why he disguised himself as Orion. Yes, because of the relationship issues, but also because, at the time he didn't want people to be burdened. The story ensues. The tournament ensues. You can read the S series for this, episode 3 to 9 for this tale. The tournament happens, Soleil being kind of a douche and a jerk, and she eventually fights Oblivion 1-on-1, and Oblivion actually wins. And the reason why he won was because 2 things. He actually spied her at one point while she was training, so he kind of knew her moves more. She did not bother because she doesn't care about him, right? Who cares about that guy who kidnapped my sister, He goes off, trains, he learns her moves, they fight, she loses. And also, Oblivion had a much better reason to fight. Like, his motive for fighting at the time was to protect the people he cared for, including Alice. Because in order to escape, in order to properly, get everyone he cared about to leave Magnolia without being harmed anymore, he had to win this tournament. And he wins. He eventually convinced Soleil to let go of the past. And then she realizes words, and not only that, but she also pays attention to Mystique. She knows that Oblivion is a nice person. She respects that. So she eventually forgives him, asks for his pardon, then they turn to Earth. And then he returns home, because now he sees Magnolia no longer the home he once wished, because he had such a difficult life. And during this course of events, we also meet Ruby, who is another OC of mine. She happens to be a younger sister figure to Oblivion, and she admires him. And then, at that point, that's how far we got as a series, and then the rest is now comes down to SRP, and then we'll see later on, he gets into relationships with characters like Violet, who reminds her of Alice, who reminded her of Ren. So yeah, everything kind of traces back to Ren, right? Oblivion also, himself, he develops more. In the SSRP, he's becoming more mature, he's going through a lot of phases. But enough about his story. Okay, we got through that. Okay, so let me talk about his personality first. Oblivion is a very positive mindset person. His positive personality traits are that he has a good sense of humor, he's very loyal to his friends, he's intelligent in combat because he's had so much years of training and fighting basically for his life, for his, everything. And he happens to be very loyal. He happens to be a very strong thinker and analyzer. And he has a very powerful voice of reason because he's lived with people like Rin who taught him these things. And Oblivion is a very charismatic person at times. He does have a good sense of humor time to time. He's not always Mr. Serious Pants. He is still 20. He's young. Negative personality traits. He can be pretty cold to rude to those who don't trust. obviously, right? That's not exactly a good trait, but that's good. That's technically understandable because why would you be nice to people who hate you, who you don't trust? But he can be kind of hard on those people. He doesn't appreciate everything he's given sometimes. That is true. He can be a little selfish. Sometimes he can be distracted and cause some deep emotion like state, like love, sadness, happiness. He get very angry, he's distracted, and he overthinks at times. Yes, that is a weakness of his. He is a very emotional person. I often tell people this, but he's a soft character. He's someone who tends to be very emotional, lets his thoughts get to him. Physically, he's a very tough guy, but mentally, emotionally, pretty weak sometimes. His crush's love interest, Ren the raccoon, he actually kind of liked her a little bit. Who's formerly now deceased. Did Ren like him back? I don't know. Mouse the Hedgehog, or Alice, formerly. Well, she's actually now deceased as well, and I will tell you that in another... Maybe I'll explain more about her later on, but yeah, she's also killed. Currently, which, again, like I said, this list is not updated. Currently, he has a crush on Violet. Violet Chaos the Dark, who is Neto's, one of Neto's main OCs. He's crushing her too. His family, sister domestic the Magpie. They're not blood related. He is the brother to Wesper, the brother to Orion, who is unfortunately killed, son to Wesper the Possum, who is actually still alive. You're probably wondering what happened to his dad. Let's just say his dad wasn't the most responsible dad, and he didn't really care about Oblivion during his later stage of his life, when he basically went to basically seek revenge against the kingdom. Something happened to Wesper. You'll find that later on in the series as well. And of course, he's son to Eliminate the Possum, his mom, who unfortunately is deceased. In terms of the description, he's basically like 3 feet 5 inches, yellow pupils and eyes, white hair. He often wears a black trench coat, black pants. So yeah, we kind of went to his backstory. We went to his personality. Let's go over his beliefs and personality. He often applies reason and cause and effect in his thinking and how people are born and how they choose how to live their lives. He can also be quite quiet, very shy, very serious at times, but because he's still young, he is carefree at times. He's like a late teen in some ways, not quite a full-fledged adult yet. Physically he is now because he's 20, but his mindset is still somewhat of a child at times. But he's also one of the most smartest people, especially when it comes to fighting. And he's a strategist. He's been in teams like Team Yin Yang. Actually, the Ying is Y-I-N. I spelled that wrong. Team Silverado, the One. These teams, basically, Team Yin Yang is the team where he's sided with Mystique. Team Silverado is Oblivion, Mystique, and Shadow. The One was this army that included a lot of people, including Oblivion, including Shadow, including Maria, including Malice, including Alpha. Basically, you learn about this team, well, this army team, in one of the episodes, episode 50, the prequels before the actual series began. You can ask me questions on that if you want. And of course, his weaponry. He can actually use weapons forged from his own energy, from his good or his evil spiritual energy. He has sword. I'm going to go over his... So we went over his backstory, went over his personality. Now I'll go more into his abilities. And I already went over his beliefs too. So now we just have to go over his abilities. He can see people's minds. I actually say he can't do that anymore. That used to be one of the things he can do. But I'm going to limit that now. He can't really do that anymore. Because I don't want him to be too overpowered. And that isn't technically a skill I actually like him having. So that was an old idea. He doesn't have that ability. But he can channel spiritual energy from his mind into good or bad energy. Basically, whatever he's feeling, it becomes his power. Because spiritual energy is like energy that comes from your surroundings. The spirit around you. He can do that. I'll explain more on that in another time. He's very experienced in tracking down sensei energy, any energy. He has 2 types of energy, like I said, dark matter, light shine. Basically, light and dark energy, both from spiritual energy. Because there are 2 types of energy. There's energy from the darkness, energy from the light. He also has techniques called Black Shadows, Gray Ashes, where Black Shadows is basically where he uses techniques come from shadows. shadowy spiritual energy. Oh, explains right down here. Shadowy spiritual energy, gray ashes, illusion type spiritual energy that sometimes like forms into ashes. He also has a transformation called the essence form, and it's basically when he becomes a deity. And he could use these techniques only when he's a deity. Soul Surge, Wolf's Howl, Divine Judgment. Soul Surge is like more spirit-like spiritual energy. It comes from animals such and such. Wolves have wild-like spiritual energy, probably like more wildlife, more like wolves, foxes, more wild animals. He can turn those, the spirit around his surroundings and into that divine judgment, mental-like spiritual energy. And he also has the ability to deal with ghosts and spirits because he is the god of spirits himself. So he has a lot of energy, chance to do it. This was an old sketch drawing I have of him once. Looks lovely, right? Not the best. I'm not the best drawer, but this was kind of an attempt at drawing him at the time. Sort of what he looks like. And of course, I showed you again earlier the other version of him. Hold on, my computer is kind of betraying me. Don't mind the... Sorry, my computer is kind of slow sometimes when I'm doing this. But anyways, this is the current... This is another version of him. I like this version of him more. The only thing I would change is that in terms of his appearances, he's more white. No, I'm not being racist. That's just his fur color. This was drawn by Nanette. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And don't mind the Lenny face. Why'd you do that? I don't like that. Anyways, back onto point. I'm being really cringy now. So yeah, you basically know about Oblivion. He is a very I'll just sum this off now with a few minutes left. To sum his character, Oblivion is a soft character. He means what he means well, and he does try to protect those he cares about. He's a very humble, very caring person. However, he does have his bad moments, and he does have imperfections. And one of his weaknesses, like I mentioned before many times now, is when he gets really emotional, and he starts to feel he lets people down, and he gets really hard on himself too. Kind of like what Alex does too, but I would say to an even greater degree. And for a lot of other reasons. I mean, Oblivion lost a lot of people in his life. He lost his mom, he lost Rin, he lost his brother Orion. And we will find out, too, again, he lost Alice. That was one person he did, in fact, lose, too. His first person that he actually liked, who liked him back. Ren was actually his first crush, I would actually say. But Ren, I don't really know. I'll have to talk to her myself. Maybe she'll tell me. I'll just go to her gravesite. Hey, did you like Oblivion? I don't know. I don't know. But Oblivion did, in fact, like her. He did, in fact, like her. That is a fact, too. One other thing. So, one thing I will say, basically to conclude, is this. When you're Oblivion, you're someone who does care about others. You're humble, you care about other people, but you tend to be hard on yourself, and you tend to be very difficult. One of the things we can take away from this character is that we have to be caring, we have to be compassionate, and we have to be understanding of others. Being empathetic, being compassionate, basically caring for others, not just simply yourself. Knowing that the world's responsibility is not just now in their hands, but also yours. The fact that you don't betray other people. The fact that you need to take responsibility for your own actions. The fact that you need to stand up for yourself to prove that you are someone to be very worthy. That is something that Oblivion is all about. He embodies that ideal, that concept where he is someone who stands up for what he believes in, but he also does it for other people. He never, and at least he tries to never, betray anyone he cares about. One of the things you will learn about Oblivion is, I always emphasize this, I will never betray anyone I love. I will never do that. And that is something he's about. A lot of characters probably see that as, and a lot of people, like you guys, probably don't think it's really special, but that is a very noble cause. That is something that Oblivion embodies, and it's something that's very special. That's a central ideology, too, because when you lose so many people, you start to treasure these people more and more, and you start to realize, man, if I keep losing these people because I'm never good enough, I'm not capable enough, it starts to really sting, and it really does make you feel you're very small, you're very weak, you're just really irrelevant and just not good enough. That's something that Oblivion really cares about, and it's something he does share a lot of personality traits with. Like, when it comes to his personality traits, that's something that's very dominant with him. And one last thing. So now that you know about him, overall as a character, his legacy, everything about him, I will say one more final thing. In terms of character development, in terms of, I personally think he's one of my best, and if not, he is actually my personal favorite character of all time. Of all the characters I use even. Simply because he's original and he actually, fun fact, is the closest to me in terms of personality. In terms of powers, techniques, hobbies, we're far off. We're just far off. But in terms of personality, he is the closest to me. So yeah. Yes, guys. I just said that. I actually think Oblivion probably is the closest to me. I will say I do have other parts of people like Soleil in me, Ace in me, other people. But Oblivion by far should be the closest OC you'll ever get of basically being me. So yeah, you're basically seeing me, a big part of me in Oblivion. We do have some differences. One of the big differences would be he's a little too emotional. But other than that, there are a lot of similarities between us. But that's pretty much it, guys. I think I had some fun.